Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Integrating Energy Conservation into Your Asset Management Practices with FCM's Green Municipal Fund. My name is Jacob Gorenkoff, and I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which I'm currently on in Ottawa is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. And as all of you are joining us today from many places, near and far, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Before I introduce today's speakers, I'm going to give you a brief run through of the webinar technology, even though I'm sure you're already familiar with it at this point in the pandemic. So today's webinar is in real time. You should now see a title screen of today's presentation and be able to hear me via your computer speakers, headset, or through your telephone if you've chosen to dial in. As we are in webinar format, you're all muted. If you wish to ask questions, you may type them in the Q&A section on the webinar control panel at any time during the presentation. We will address as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Today, we'll be hearing from three speakers. The first is Jen Arnfield, Sustainable Affordable Housing Lead for FCM's Green Municipal Fund. Second is Edward Beckett, Asset Management Coordinator with BC Nonprofit Housing Association. And the third is Ramsey Kawar, Director of Greening and Sustainable Business Practices with Housing Nova Scotia. Welcome, Jen, Edward, and Ramsey. Jen, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jacob, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Really happy to be here for part 2 of our webinar series about energy efficiency and retrofits and affordable housing. Wanted to start with just a quick reminder of the first session of our series, just in case you weren't able to make it back in June. Our first session was about meeting Canada's net zero energy targets while reducing energy poverty. And so just to set the stage for this webinar, I wanted to just talk about where there's some really great opportunity for the affordable housing sector to do deep energy retrofits and improve energy management within asset management. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So just to start, a large percentage of Canada's carbon emissions come from buildings, 18%. So if we have a hope of meeting Canada's climate goals, our 2030 climate goals, buildings are a really important place to start. And the affordable housing sector largely is made up of older buildings. At least half of the stock is over 40 years old and 90% is at least 25 years old. This is largely reflective of federal investment in affordable housing in the last number of years. But as a result, there's a lot of opportunity in the existing stock to improve the energy efficiency of those buildings. So next slide, please. So we don't have national data on this point, but our friends at BCMPHA who are joining us today do have provincial data from 2010, which is on this slide, which shows that the average annual total energy use intensity, or TUI, for nonprofit buildings compared to the BC average here. So a TUI, a total energy use intensity, shows the total energy consumed in a building, which includes natural gas and electricity in a year, and it's based on the building's square footage. So for reference, a typical building built to today's standards would have a TUI of around 200 kilowatt hours per meter squared. So if you take a look at this slide here, you'll see that particularly in the apartment and the single detached house space, the nonprofit average is significantly higher than the BC average, and both are higher than what a typical building would be built to today's standards. So as you can see, there's real and significant opportunities, and we expect that this trend would be similar across the country, not just in BC alone. Next slide, please. So another important consideration in the context of inefficient older housing is that of energy poverty, which is qualitatively defined as the experience of households that struggle meeting their home energy needs. specifically including electricity and home heating fuels. So currently there's no official definition of energy poverty in Canada. However, the Canadian Urban Sustainability Practitioners Network, or CUSP, whose research we've included here in this presentation, has measured energy poverty as a household paying 6% or more of their after-tax income on energy. And so for reference, most households in Canada pay on average 3% of their average after-tax income on energy. So this measure reflects at least twice the national average. And I think it's particularly interesting to look at this definition of core housing need, which I'm sure the majority of you are familiar with. A household in core housing need is when the housing is inadequate or in need of major repairs, or is unsuitable or without adequate bedrooms, or is unaffordable when the shelter costs are more than 30% of the total before tax household income. And this affordability criteria does not consider housing costs outside of rent or mortgage payments, so it doesn't account for utilities or other costs such as transportation. As you can imagine, many of the impacts of core housing need and energy poverty are the same in terms of the need to choose between paying for shelter or energy or other essentials like groceries, the mental health impacts associated with these situations, and there's also energy-specific impacts to health and well-being. These may also occur for those in core housing need, particularly where the housing falls into the category of inadequate or in need of major repair. So across Canada, approximately 20% of households are in energy poverty. So again, paying 6% or more of their after-tax income, while about 13% are in core housing need. So energy poverty and core housing need both disproportionately impact marginalized populations, including lone parent households, particularly those led by women, as well as Indigenous and recent immigrant households. And while the community housing sector is a key solution to addressing core housing need in Canada, and is, I know, always interested in ensuring affordability, there does remain some opportunity in this sector to address energy poverty. So as of 2016, 45% of households living in non-market housing were paying for utilities, and about 17% of households living in non-market housing were in energy poverty. And then when you take those two together, that last circle there, that represents those in non-market housing paying for their utilities and in energy poverty, and that's about 37% of households. And so better management of energy performance and energy retrofits is a really great opportunity to address this issue. So the last slide in our quick summary just kind of runs over the benefits of energy efficiency, great opportunities to save costs, either for you as a provider or for the residents in the building. In a warming climate, there's a great opportunity to consider cooling, adding cooling, improving climate resilience, improving resident health and well-being. Lots of reasons to do this. And now I'm really excited to hand it over to Edward, who's gonna tell us how.
Thanks, Jen. So as housing providers, your service is to provide safe, secure, and affordable housing to vulnerable members of your community. To do this, your organization relies on the people that work so hard to make this happen, but also on buildings or assets. Maintaining building performance is key to providing this service. Interruptions can be costly and have consequences to your organization's finances, occupant comfort, and even the environment. In order to maintain this level of service, a plan or a process must be put in place. Now, in life, there are very few things that perform better the more you use them. Maybe a good baseball glove or pair of jeans possibly, but building systems do not usually follow this trend. As usage increases, performance will start to decrease. Without having a strategy to mitigate this, costs will increase, energy will be wasted, and occupant comfort will decrease. At BC Nonprofit Housing Association, our asset management team helps affordable housing providers integrate energy management into their asset management practices. This helps reduce operating costs, reduces greenhouse gases produced, and it increases tenant comfort. And of course, it helps keep affordable housing affordable. So first, let's talk about asset management. Asset management works to minimize the cost of owning capital assets while ensuring required service levels are met. Asset management can be a simple process, or it could be more complex depending on the organization, but it always connects four key elements: people, information, assets, and finances. Asset management connects the expertise and activities of people with the information about a building's assets and finances. It connects all of these so that informed decisions can be made that will support your organization for years to come. So, asset management will minimize costs and helps to reduce service interruptions. Well, why do we need to worry about energy management then? Energy management helps organizations lower their energy use, which in turn reduces operating costs, greenhouse gas emissions, and passes these benefits on to the occupants. Just as with asset management, energy management practices connect people with information, and this allows them to make informed decisions that will help their assets reduce energy consumption. Today, we'll look at three pathways that connect energy management and asset management practices. We'll try to see how we can connect people with information about their organization's assets and finances, but we'll also connect those to energy consumption. In doing so, we'll find pathways leading to a sustainable delivery of the services that are so critical to your operations. For the first pathway, we'll look at how we can support our organizations while reducing energy consumption and provide a solid foundation for the other pathways. Asset inventories and maintenance plans are items that support organizations of all sizes and are part of an asset management plan. An asset inventory is the first step to understanding what you have in your building. If recorded with enough detail, it will provide serial numbers, installation dates, and other information that you only realize how valuable it is until you need it. At BC Nonprofit, we've worked with small societies with one building run by volunteers that have simple asset inventories created in Word documents. Like Maureen here, a volunteer who maintains 20 units of affordable housing in beautiful Rosslyn, BC. Her asset inventory contains detailed information of systems and assets in each unit and helps other volunteers like her daughter and granddaughter share this information and maintain consistency. Other nonprofit organizations have had their asset inventories developed through professional services. BC Housing has commissioned a software tool, Asset Planner, to capture building data collected through building condition assessments. This is a web-based program owned by Amoresco that is a repository of building data, which can be shared between BC Housing, BC Nonprofit, and the building owner. At BC Nonprofit, Asset Planner is used as the host for our capital planning template and is accessible to nonprofit housing providers. Another example of how this data can support your organization and its asset management planning. So I'll give you an example of how an asset inventory recently helped a society I'm working with. A retrofit project was wrapping up and they had a good chunk of budget left. How often does that happen? Well, the funders suggested they use the remaining budget on another project if they had the need. After coming to BC Nonprofit Housing Association with this information, we were able to access their asset inventory through Asset Planner and could see that the building's hot water tanks were a priority item in need of replacement. In a matter of minutes, we were able to begin building the business case showing a need. We connected people with information about assets, leading to informed decisions to be made about finances and energy use. A secondary source of funding has been secured, and we're looking to move this project forward with a low carbon option to further reduce greenhouse gases emitted. So we have information about our building systems. Oh, let's go back a slide. We have information about our building systems. We need to pick a maintenance program. A maintenance program is a set of related activities with a long-term plan that keeps systems running smoothly and prevents costly downtime. But having a maintenance program connected to energy management can further help reduce maintenance costs and improve energy performance. And on an organizational level, creating policies that link maintenance with energy management can ensure all aspects of your property operate in an efficient, consistent, and safe manner. Unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits haven't connected information about their buildings and energy use and operate within the emergency maintenance program. As complaints start to roll in, an investigation begins, and the system is either repaired or replaced. Sound familiar? The problem efficiency-wise is that the system may already be wasting energy leading up to the breakdown. And then on top of this, if a replacement is necessary, energy efficient equipment usually is not considered. The planning really starts in the middle at routine maintenance. And as we move into preventative maintenance, we really start to connect the specific needs of the building system with a plan. Again, this comes with help of our asset inventory, so we can get specific manufacturer recommendations on the maintenance. Let's pause now and highlight a few of these low-cost preventative maintenance items that could lead to 5 to 10% energy savings right now. So we'll start with something that everyone has at home, in the office. This stuff is everywhere. I'm talking about dust. Wait, how does dust affect the efficiency in our buildings? Well, for baseboard heaters, dust actually makes it harder for the heat to transfer from the baseboard fins into the surrounding room. Now more energy will be required, more greenhouse gases produced just to provide that same amount of heat to the space, just from not dusting. So next, you look at your asset inventory and it shows building controls, and you think, well, what maintenance can we do here? Simply checking to see if the controls are working is a great start. During my career as a Red Seal electrician, a common thing I'd see would be motion sensors set to bypass, or outside lights that would be on all day. Ensuring these controls are operational and staff are trained to use them are the first steps to access the savings they're designed to provide. Heating set points are an important maintenance item to check. Set them as low as possible while still providing appropriate space and water heating level for tenants. Communicating with tenants is key for this to get ahead of those complaints. And a final item you may not think about when it comes to maintenance is insulation. I mean, how do you maintain that? Well, I've been in countless attics where the insulation has been walked on, compressed, or pushed to the side, decreasing its ability to prevent heat transfer or insulate. In this case, the heating system again has to run for longer, more energy consumed because insulation levels have not been maintained. Having an asset management plan in place is necessary to support optimal building performance and maintaining the value of your assets. So what resources are there to help? At BC Nonprofit, we have online courses that can help building operators gain experience in creating asset inventories, maintenance plans, and help with their capital planning. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Natural Resources Canada, and FCM have guides and tools that integrate energy efficiency into your property management procedures. Our next pathway to unlocking energy savings takes us to building checkups. So over time, buildings become less efficient and they consume more energy just to provide that same old service. But what if we could integrate building checkups into our asset management process that would detect opportunities to improve building performance? Asset and energy management are both data-driven practices, so let's start by collecting more information. The first place to start is with a level 1 or walk-through energy audit. Just like the name states, an energy audit will walk through the building, looking at mechanical, lighting, and building envelope systems, and they'll speak to building staff. A report will be generated, providing an overview of building systems and highlighting areas where energy may be saved, even providing low to no cost solutions. Energy conserving measures, or ECMs, will be identified, and systems will be noted that require further investigation. At BC Nonprofit Housing Association, the free walkthrough energy audits we provide to affordable housing providers are one of the first ways we approach connecting energy and asset management within their organization. And through FCM's Sustainable Affordable Housing Initiative, regional energy coaches are available throughout Canada to help provide this service to nonprofit housing providers and co-ops. These walkthrough audits are a great way to set up the next kind of building checkup, level 2 audits. A level 2 audit is an engineered energy study that provides more detail about the energy conserving measures, their costs, and expected savings. This detailed study provides the information needed to make informed decisions about building upgrades and can ensure energy efficiency is prioritized. Funding options are available to help with this step. Here in BC, utilities have programs to help fund energy studies, and the Sustainable Affordable Housing Initiative's planning and study grants are resources that can help make these engineering studies happen. Energy audits can also show the need for the final type of building checkup, recommissioning. Recommissioning is an optimization process that benefits large buildings with complicated systems or high performance buildings of all sizes. In fact, buildings that have integrated building management systems may perform poorly if recommissioning is not accounted for. So the goals of recommissioning align with those we talked about today, ensuring building needs of occupants are met while reducing energy consumption. Recommissioning looks at how building systems are operated and maintained, and then optimizes the design, performance, and the system's integration with the rest of the building. It assesses the staff's ability to operate and maintain these items, and it can be shown to reduce energy use by 5 to even 30% annually. So what does recommissioning look like in action? Here's a story of how small actions lead to big savings through recommissioning. Our story takes us to Sunset Towers in Vancouver, BC. The towers are heated by a central mechanical plant supplying hot water to radiators, rooftop ventilation units, and heat exchangers for domestic hot water. BC Nonprofit Housing Association partnered with BC Housing to leverage funding through BC Hydro, our electrical utility, and Fortis BC, our natural gas provider. They began by completing a Fortis BC custom energy study, or level 2 audit, to help identify energy conserving measures. Impact engineering was brought on to perform this study, and what they found in their first site visit was interesting. The existing systems already had high efficiency equipment. After looking into the design, it was clear the complexity did not make for efficient operation. It was also clear that the building automation system was failing to perform its function. This was causing maintenance personnel to make manual adjustments to the system. The combination of these factors was preventing the mechanical equipment from reaching its high efficiency potential. A recommissioning of the system was in order. The first step was to physically separate the hot water heating and space heating piping. Now certain boilers would be used for hot water and others for space heating. This eliminated a complex control valve and allowed the boilers to match the heating demand required. Recommissioning was working to redesign the system rather than just install expensive, high-efficiency equipment. In addition to this, a new DDC control system was installed, which allowed for the boilers and ventilation systems to be adjusted based on the outdoor temperatures. Air volume could be adjusted seasonally as well. These controls also helped ensure that domestic hot water was stored at the ideal temperature range. So, on to the numbers. In the first year post-retrofit, Sunset Towers saved more than 4,000 gigajoules of natural gas, accounting for over 200 tons of carbon emissions. This equated to a 25% reduction in annual natural gas use and a payback of under 2 years. This is a great example of how thoughtful planning and design can lead to small actions that unlock big energy savings. Let's get those buildings working smarter, not harder. So it's great to recommission when possible, but what about when things just need to be replaced? How can we ensure our asset management process is connected to energy management? Energy efficient retrofits will provide the last pathway to improving building energy performance. So it would be easy just to look at an older system and say, swap that out with the like for like model. It worked before, so that's all you need, right? Well, that approach doesn't attempt to connect people with information about their assets and finances, and especially energy use. Here's what's possible when energy efficient design and equipment selection is prioritized, and what happens when it's not. Our second case study involves replacing a building's boilers, but not because they were old and breaking down. In fact, they were less than 10 years old. Let's look at why it's important to have systems designed with energy efficiency prioritized from the onset. Our story takes us to Dunwood Place in New Westminster, BC, 193 units of affordable housing. BC Nonprofit followed its usual playbook for this one, beginning with a walkthrough energy audit, setting up a utility-funded engineering study. This study identified the need to replace the boilers and hot water heating systems and recommission the ventilation system. So why, if the boilers were less than 10 years old, would it be a good idea to replace them? Well, they were actually too big for the building, which was causing them to cycle on and off frequently, especially in low heating conditions. The domestic hot water was being heated through instantaneous coils, requiring very hot water and additional boiler runtime now because of the cycling. The recommendation from the engineers was to replace the boilers with smaller condensing models and replace the instantaneous hot water coils with the storage tank system. This would prevent the boiler from cycling on and off and allow for staging of the boilers, leading to higher efficiency. This upgrade led to a 30% reduction in energy use by the system. This example highlights the need for not only selecting energy efficient equipment, but having it properly sized and staged for the most efficient design possible. This will maximize energy savings as opposed to just replacing the unit with a like-for-like model. But the energy savings did not end there. The ventilation system was identified as a potential target. It was overventilating the space, consuming too much energy. Energy was just being wasted. The existing air makeup unit was relatively new and it could be modified. Airflow was just reduced by almost 3 times. Air balancing was performed at the supply grills, and the supply air temperature was also lowered, leading to even more energy savings. In total, the project resulted in natural gas savings of approximately 2,500 gigajoules per year, equating to 135 tons of CO2 emissions. Subsequent maintenance costs were reduced, and the total energy savings were approximately $18,000 per year. This project was a great example, and we were able to stack utility and BC housing funding to cover the cost for the entire project. 3 pathways leading you towards energy savings that are just waiting to be found. Thanks for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about connecting people with information about their assets, but also their energy consumption. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward. And now I think we're going to have Ramsey take over.
Thank you. So I guess we're going to be talking about energy integration into housing Nova Scotia's asset management strategy. And we begin, next slide, with the typology of buildings. So we have a challenge, as many other housing authorities and housing providers, is that our assets are built, 60% of our assets were built before 1978. And most of the units are for seniors, which means that they spend most of their time indoors, and it's very difficult to reduce the heating demand. Please. So housing typologies in our portfolio include buildings that are 3 units and greater. We call them capital asset management. They fall under the capital asset management program, and then the little camp we call the 1 and 2 unit buildings, and those are around 2,700, while the camp buildings are around 9,000 units. And the single family units account for 65% of the total number of assets. However, only account for 20% of the total 12,000 units. And the multi-unit residential buildings include apartment, low-rise, and high-rise, and account for 44% of the total number of rental units. Next, please. In terms of energy use, in 2020, Housing Nova Scotia consumed 214 equivalent gigawatt hours of fuel, and 93% of the total energy use came from public housing. And the majority of it was from electricity. And historically, Housing Nova Scotia spends about between 20 to 30 million, or 15% of its budget, on utilities for energy costs. Most tenants don't pay for their utilities, and then there's no funding for any energy reduction programs. I mean, dedicated funding. Next, please. The GHG emissions, just very quickly, Housing Nova Scotia's emissions during the in 2017 was 78 kilotons of CO2 equivalent, and then of that, the provincial total was 0.5%. Next. Utility costs. The annual utility costs show the peak utility costs occurred in 2014 at a total of 24 million. And in 2020, it was around 21.7 million. And like I said before, electricity demand costs account for the largest portion of the total cost, followed by oil, natural gas, water, and propane. Next. So a very quick summary of the past and present initiatives. I'll be highlighting not every detail in terms of this path that started in 2008. So commitment to sustainability began with something called the greening strategy, and Housing Nova Scotia was under the Department of Community Services at the time. So we just laid this out for our own as well sanity to see where we were, where we are, and where we're heading. So next, please. So the greening strategy, we would say, lasted between span between 2008 and 2014, and it had 5 thrusts to it, mainly building envelope performance upgrading, mechanical electrical systems upgrading. That means, well, the building envelope upgrades, we began energy audits. It was before my time, but basically it started the upgrading of windows, doors, insulation, and right sizing motors in terms of the mechanical systems, natural gas, propane conversions, multiple boiler controls, burner efficiency, mechanical insulation, etc. All the things that typically would make mechanical electrical systems more efficient. And then, of course, maintenance and operations began to be a little bit more organized. So we have annual maintenance programs, training on emerging technologies and products, and workshops on energy conservation. And then, of course, building occupants, there were some training, awareness, support for energy conservation, and bulk purchasing to benefit residents by passing on savings. Coin-operated laundry equipment to encourage more efficient use of machines. And then with services and information, YARDI property management program, reports on energy consumption data, etc. So those were the beginnings. Next slide, please. And the greening strategy, I would say, just in summary, led to a total savings of 8%. Just a very quick snapshot. And that set the stage for the next phase, please, next slide, which is an energy reduction initiative, which started when I joined Housing Nova Scotia in 2014. And a few things that we did at the time, which is we signed a memo of understanding with Efficiency Nova Scotia, which enabled us to get an on-site energy manager. We have 2 of them right now attending. One of them calls himself Ramzi Kawar, but I don't know, he entered with my credentials, and Matt Lee. So we're very grateful for that because they are really helpful in terms of monitoring and actually getting us all the rebates we'll talk about. We also constructed 3 passive house pilot projects. We'll look through them very quickly. And then we instituted an envelope upgrading program. Then we had a couple of studies done with a grant from CMHC to actually monitor both the passive house and the upgrading. So we had these 2 research initiatives, which we're wrapping up at the moment. We received the final reviews from CMHC. And then we began using Portfolio Manager a few years back for energy consumption. We established a baseline. We have all electrically heated buildings now uploaded to Portfolio Manager, and we're working on an automatic upload for the oil-based buildings. We also documented the passive house experience in a chapter of a book called Sustainable Real Estate, a multidisciplinary approach to an evolving system, chapter 14. Next, please. So with Efficiency Nova Scotia, between 2014 and 2019, those are some of the programs that we were able to benefit from for our asset, portfolio. And those, I would say, helped us to receive around $137,500 in rebates. And those rebates really help in terms of not just the rebate, the money, but the actual results in terms of reducing the energy. Next slide, please. We'll just go very quickly. We have these three passive houses. The first one, I would say, I think it was the first affordable passive house in Canada. It's a duplex in Truro. And basically was a building that existed before that was torn down. And luckily, my boss at the time said, let's try this. And it got FIAS certification. And the annual energy savings above code was 63%. And the annual cost savings above code were 6,000 annually, 6,300. And GHG reductions were 25 ton of CO2 equivalent. And the next one was another duplex that was a building that burnt down. We renovated it into a passive house. And those are, not very large projects, but they actually were pilots, and we were trying to see what path we take with the passive house. Next, please. And the third was a building, a multi-unit building that was sitting vacant for social services, and we renovated it into apartments, low market rent apartments. And the savings there was in the range of 37% above code, and then cost savings annually of 9,000, and GHG of 47 tons of CO2 equivalent. Next, please. An example of the upgrading, envelope upgrades. And when we say envelope upgrades, we started to add insulation whenever we change the siding. And then we add Energy Star windows, we shift to vinyl siding, and the energy unit intensity before retrofit was 144, after retrofit was 130. So the annual savings over code was $9,000, and the annual GHG emissions was 10 tons. And this is a small unit, building of 10 units. Next, please. So the biggest, I would say, next project was the ISEP project, which is a 4-year project of 22 million cost shared with the province. And it included 5 pathways for energy efficiency for our asset management portfolio, envelope upgrades, net zero pilot projects, attic insulation, and photovoltaic projects, as well as heat pumps. This project is still being implemented, so we don't have cumulative data on the whole project yet. We are working on that with our team. An example of, these are 2 examples of photovoltaics, and again, GHG savings are 22 tons per year, and they got some rebates from efficiency. These are small units as well, 33 kilowatts. Next. And we come to the final phase where we are at right now, which is the energy management strategy. And this took us about a couple of years to hammer out. And with consultations with our team, and then we finally were able to get approval and buy-in with our senior management. So the vision is to promote healthy, sustainable, affordable housing while acting on climate change through the reduction of energy consumption and mitigation of GHG emissions. And it's very important to state that to have an energy management strategy for housing Nova Scotia really sets the path, and the principles are to respond to climate change, contribute to the lowering of global warming, and then support the national housing strategy of reaching 53% reductions by 2030 over 2005 levels, and net zero emissions by 2050. So we committed to these three targets to align themselves not only with the national but also with the provincial targets. And it really sets the path and the roadmap, if you want, for the next 5 years. And hopefully, even if we are not there, the same team that this document, and I insisted when we first started to have this so that it's no longer just the initiative of one person. There is a plan, and we all refer to it. And I believe that's the most important thing in an organization, is to have all the things refer back to those principles. So, I mean, some of the benefits that we see is increased and accelerated deployment of energy and GHG reduction, environmental, social, economic improvements across the housing sector, not just within housing Nova Scotia, but also we're supportive of the community housing sector. Energy efficiency projects can have a target to deliver annual savings costs, improved management processes and behavioral change across government. By the way, I think we are within Nova Scotia an example of a department that has taken upon itself this challenge of setting a strategy and abiding by it. So we see that a lot of people, even in the private sector, come to us and say, hey, you did this and that, we'd like to learn from you. So education and awareness, also for our staff, and improved governance, accountability, strategic management, and reporting. So those are the focus areas. And we try to make it simple. So there's 3 targets, 4 focus areas, and then 20 objectives. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramsey. And thanks, Edward. It's really helpful, I think, to see some of the methods that you've been describing come to light, and the benefits associated with them in the examples that you've shown. So thank you again so much for that. I'm going to close it out, and I'm going to be pretty quick here, but basically, and Edward mentioned this too, just a quick reminder that FCM has some funding that can actually help you undertake some of these pathways to improving energy performance with asset management and undertaking energy retrofits as well. So FCM's Green Municipal Fund has a sustainable, affordable housing initiative. The slide in front of you has all of our funding offered, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I will plug our website, and it's referenced at the end. It's fcm.ca/sustainable affordable housing. But just to highlight a couple of things really quickly, we have funding basically to help you with your project at all stages, right from the very beginning at project initiation with that planning grant that Edward mentioned as well. So it can help you in some of those that pathway number 2 activities in terms of doing the planning grants and study grants, doing those kind of early assessments that are required, doing some of that modeling, doing the planning to actually set up your project. And then when you're ready to actually execute a retrofit, we have financing available, grants and loans combined. And I will just mention in terms of our retrofit funding that our grants are actually tied to the anticipated energy performance. So if you're going to reduce the energy use in your building by 25%, that's the starting point. That's kind of the minimum we need you to come in at. you'll receive a 25% grant, and it goes up to 50%. So a 40% anticipated improvement would be a 40% grant. So really intended to help incent you to have the best and most ambitious retrofit project that you can find. So again, more information is available online. Please do check that out. So next slide, please. We also have a number of ways that we're able to support you, obviously with our funding, which I should mention is stackable with other federal, provincial, municipal, and private dollars. In particular, we designed the fund with the National Housing Co-Investment Fund in mind to be able to stack with that. You can also stack with BC housing funding. We see a lot of projects come through with both of those as other sources of funding. But I'll also mention that again, on our website, we have a number of other tools and resources available. We have a few case studies. We have some fact sheets that are really targeted on getting started, particularly around energy retrofits. And we also have a resource library, which houses a number of helpful tools kind of at any stage of your project, and they're not all necessarily FCM resources, but it's a great kind of library of resources that you may be able to find something to help you along. And then we have regional energy coaches, and we have one of them joining us today, Edward. He mentioned the program, so maybe I'll just get you to go to the next slide, please. So we're so excited and fortunate to have partnered with BC Nonprofit Housing Association, but also the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada and the Community Housing Transformation Center on this pilot program, which is really intended to help providers kind of figure this stuff out, particularly what Edward presented on pathway number 2 to get you started on your retrofit. So we have Edward who's focused on the BC region. We have someone in the Prairie region, someone in the Atlantic region. We have someone focused on the cooperative sector across the country. But if you're interested in support, we're not going to turn anyone away. So just reach out to us and we'll be able to set you up with a regional energy coach who can help do a walkthrough energy assessment and get you started down that pathway to improved energy performance in your building. And that's about it. That does it for our presentation. Here's how to find us again, and really happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Jen, Edward, and Ramsey. Really informative presentations as always. We're now going to be opening the floor to any comments or questions. So if anybody has a question or a comment, please type it into the Q&A function on the webinar control panel at any time. So just to kick us off, and question to all three of you, you can decide who wants to answer first. Can you elaborate a bit more on how integrating energy conservation into asset management practices can improve a housing provider's bottom line?
Well, I think like a lot of the pathways that we showed will help you integrate asset management and energy management. And I mean, really either process is going to help you with your bottom line, but they're both looking for slightly different things. As you saw from some of my slides, they're connecting very similar things, but that last step, they're sort of concerned with different initiatives. So covering both just kind of covers your basis, and it ensures that you'll have more benefits, savings coming in. So.
Yeah, I think that it does help the savings, as we saw in the slide with the first strategy. We're working on showing that those savings for the next phases, like, you know, the energy reduction initiative overall. We are struggling, or we have a lot of systems on our with various pieces of information, which we're part of the strategy is to try to streamline and have the information accessible to everybody. So we're using, for example, Cognos as on top of VRD. We have VFA. We have a system that's built in Excel, an RFS system, we call it. So all of these systems at the moment don't really talk to each other, but and of course we have the portfolio manager. But we are definitely we see the reductions, but we don't have it in a big picture, number yet. But we're working towards that.
I guess I can just round it out to say, some of the research that we've looked at has demonstrated kind of a deeper energy retrofit can save somewhere in the region of 40 to 60% in those kind of key operating costs. So in terms of the kind of bottom line, great opportunity if you are a provider that covers the utility costs. And then kind of on the other side of it, that going back to kind of that energy poverty slide earlier on, another opportunity to really impact affordability for residents if it happens to be the residents that are paying for utilities.
Absolutely. Thanks for those answers. Jen, just because we get this question every FCM Green Municipal Fund webinar, and I know you already said it, but do you mind just reiterating, is your funding stackable with CMHC and private funding?
Yes, happy to reiterate it. Yes, it is stackable. We did actually, we were very kind of mindful of the funding that's out there because, I probably say this every time because it's kind of a funny thing to say. We have a $300 million fund. I didn't mention that. $300 million is a lot of money, but it's also not a lot of money in the context of the need that is out there. And even some of the other funding, like the National Housing Strategy, we've really designed the program recognizing the need that there are going to be other sources of funding that would need to be leveraged, and particularly for our funding to kind of make the biggest impact that we could. So yes, the quick answer is yes, it's stackable.
Thanks, Jen. So we don't currently have any questions from members of the audience. So just to conclude, are there any concluding remarks that any of you would like to offer?
No, I'd like to thank you, Jen and Edward and Jacob. I really think that FCM is doing a fantastic job. I'm saying this wholeheartedly, even though we don't qualify to get your funding. We have been telling everybody, all the community housing sector here, to make use of your, and hopefully we see more and more uptake from Nova Scotia and Atlantic region. But yeah, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, I'll echo that. So thank you for the opportunity as well. And I think with these pathways or energy and asset management, every organization is going to be different. Every building and situation is going to be a bit different. It's about finding what pathway, what opportunities are right for you right now, and taking small steps that eventually will lead to big savings. So thank you.
And I'll just thank Edward and Ramsey in particular, who, as he mentioned, Housing Nova Scotia is not eligible as a provincial organization for our funding, but he still was a great sport and came and talked about the amazing work that they're doing over there in their portfolio. And as always, thanks to CHRA for hosting us so graciously. And I'll just one more time plug our website. Maybe I'll pop it in the chat, fcm.ca/sustainable affordable housing. Check out our regional energy coaches. They're great source of information and support.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jen, Edward, and Ramsey for the very informative presentations. I really enjoyed listening, and I'm sure everybody in the audience did as well. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. I'll be following up with an email with a post-webinar survey and some other information in the coming days. And until then, take care and stay safe, everybody.